After 5 years, I've grown resentful. I pay most bills, he won't take job offers, and Valentine's fell flat. I feel unappreciated. I am seeking guidance regarding a relationship spanning over 5 years. I am a 21-year-old female engaged to a 22-year-old male. Throughout our time together, I have developed a significant amount of resentment toward him. I have consistently been the financial provider in our relationship, taking on the role of the breadwinner. While I do not necessarily mind this role, it is particularly challenging for me as a woman working in a predominantly male blue-collar environment. I enjoy my job to a certain degree. I have been employed for over 3 years and currently have the opportunity to train others in the skills I acquired. Although it is not my dream occupation, I believe in equality and want a partner who will be equally devoted to our future. Unfortunately, my fiancé does not earn as much as I do, and despite the economic challenges, I sense a lack of effort and maturity on his part. He seems reluctant to take risks for our relationship. He insists he is doing his utmost, yet I find myself questioning why he wouldn't exert the same level of effort for me that I would for him. I hold a higher position at work, which enables me to potentially assist him in securing a well-paying job, yet he is unwilling to seize this opportunity. I find this hurtful. I have been working since I was 16, and I have always envisioned a partner who would cherish, protect, and care for me. However, I do not feel that he is giving his all, and it often seems as if he does not care. Fast forward to the present, I am not a materialistic person, but I do appreciate receiving gifts on special occasions such as Christmas, birthdays, Valentine's Day, and anniversaries. These gestures hold significant meaning for me, and I have communicated this to him previously. A side note: before we met, his stepfather passed away on Valentine's Day, which has led him to avoid celebrating it. However, I expressed its importance to me, and he initially appeared understanding. In the early stages of our relationship, he frequently forgot important dates, requiring me to remind him repeatedly, a pattern that has persisted throughout our time together. Sometimes it feels as though I am acting more like a mother than a fiancé. While he remembered Valentine's Day this year, I had previously mentioned that I did not require much, just some candy, a card, or a stuffed animal from a dollar store. I assured him that anything he chose would make me happy. To reciprocate, I prepared a thoughtful gift for him that included photos of us, a card, his favorite coffee, and candy. Honestly, I anticipated that he would do something similar for me. I always strive to provide him with lavish gifts because I love him and wish the best for him. This time, however, I decided to cut costs. Yet, he did not match my effort this Valentine's Day. Our finances are separate, but I cover a significant majority of our expenses and often pay for his bills without expecting repayment. He has either exhausted his funds, been unemployed, or occasionally contributed to shared costs, which explains his financial situation. Recently, he suggested postponing our Valentine's celebration for 2 weeks due to being broke. Question 1: is it rational for me to feel unhappy about this? I was not pleased with his suggestion, but offered him some money on multiple occasions so he could buy me something small. Despite my insistence that I would appreciate even the most modest gifts, I question whether I should feel foolish for sending him money for my own Valentine's gift. Question 2: I justified in feeling foolish for providing him with money for my Valentine's present. Considering that I had already planned to treat us to takeout, he picked it up from work. When he returned home, I presented him with his gifts, but he appeared indifferent. I made him a handcrafted box filled with thoughtful items, yet his response was lackluster. He simply expressed his thanks without taking the time to appreciate what I had prepared. At this point, I began to wonder whether he had gotten me anything at all, particularly as I had seen others receive gifts throughout the day. While eating the takeout he brought home, I discovered a hidden card within the packaging. I appreciated the sentiment expressed in the card, though he also included a comment about something I do that annoys him, which dampened my enjoyment. I acknowledged the card, but felt taken aback. Additionally, I noticed he didn't procure any drinks for our dinner. I had asked him to pick some up, but he declined to stop on his way home, claiming we could only get what we ordered. When I offered to pay for soda while placing the order, he still said no. As I was eating, I asked him again if he could run to a store just 2 minutes away for a drink. He declined. Eventually, I suggested he could do this for me as my Valentine's gift. I often feel that he does not consider my needs. When I voiced my feelings, he insisted that this wasn't the case. I reiterated that I just wanted a simple gesture, even offering to accompany him on the trip, yet he still did not want to go. Question 3, is it unreasonable for me to request that he perform a simple task for me as my partner? I feel I've contributed significantly financially, emotionally, and physically. Ultimately, I expressed my true feelings, but I was willing to drop it and told him not to worry about going. This led to a significant argument, during which he yelled at me, calling me ungrateful, lazy, and suggesting that I can never be wrong and lack support. I told him that I anticipated his responses to my feelings, but he retorted with excuses. I do not feel that he validates my emotions. He thinks he is providing solutions, but I often find them unworkable, which leads him to disengage from the conversation. He becomes agitated, cries, breaks things, and claims that I can never admit fault. Am I the issue here? This makes me reflect on the resentment I hold due to unresolved past grievances. I have just begun living for myself again, rather than solely for him, but this shift has left me feeling depleted. I have been responsible for cooking, cleaning, and supporting him in various capacities. Question 4, is it realistic to desire a partner who can also provide even after I have endeavored to make this relationship work for so long? During our high school years, I even completed his online coursework to ensure he graduated alongside me. I realize that it is exhausting. I am feeling depressed and unable to tend to my own needs, let alone his. I believe he should step up now when I am feeling low in the same way I supported him when he required assistance. The feelings of resentment I harbor stem from the times I supported him only to feel abandoned and overwhelmed myself. Moreover, I carry emotional pain from past arguments, particularly instances when he has pushed me during heated confrontations while under the influence of alcohol. He has expressed that my presence exacerbates his struggles with drinking. This narrative encompasses a considerable amount of information, and if you have reached this point, I appreciate your patience. I recognize I need professional help, but I currently lack the financial resources. Therefore, my concluding inquiries are question 5, how can I determine if I will eventually overcome this resentment? Question 6, does anyone have advice on how to navigate this relationship? I genuinely love him, but I am also striving to learn to love myself. Story 2. I dated a guy overseas, felt used after just a hookup, then he ignored me with another girl. I exposed him, now I became anxious. I, 26-year-old female, was in a relationship with a man, 29-year-old male, from my hometown while I was traveling. He happened to reside in the same foreign city as I was visiting for just 1 month. He reached out after seeing my Instagram post, suggesting we take a day trip together. We enjoyed ourselves, keeping the atmosphere friendly. Following that, we went out one night and ended up sleeping together. The next day was spent relaxing and getting something to eat. I had initially planned to leave that morning, but he encouraged me to stay another day. On the morning of my departure to the next destination, he took me out for breakfast. We maintained communication during my travels, although I started to notice he was not as invested as before. He even booked a flight to join me for 2 nights at another location. A few weeks later, as I was preparing to return home, a long distance away, I had a feeling this would be the end of our connection. Although I didn't want to face it then, I look back and realize my intuition had warned me about him from the beginning. After some self-reflection on why I was attracted to him, I remembered he had cheated in both of his past relationships and had engaged in other troubling behavior. There were numerous warning signs. Therefore, I chose to protect myself and distance myself, particularly as I sensed a change in his energy and did not want to get hurt. When he sensed my shift in demeanor, he became significantly more attentive. He began to text me daily, responded promptly, expressed how much he liked me, claimed he wanted to date me, and praised my qualities, describing me as attractive, funny, and wifey material. It felt like there was a push and pull dynamic at play. He would withdraw when I reciprocated his interest, and then pursue aggressively when I tried to maintain my distance to protect myself. I have reflected on my part in this relationship pattern. He continued to chase after me while I was back home for 9 months. Eventually, I moved to the country where he lived because I had fallen in love with it. He frequently expressed his desire to see me again. After getting settled, finding a job, and securing housing, he invited himself and his friends to come see me on a Saturday night, saying he was eager to reconnect. That evening, we had sexual relations. After a lengthy encounter, he immediately ordered a taxi home. I casually mentioned that I would have appreciated spending even a brief moment together afterward, as the quick departure made me feel somewhat used. When I brought this up, being respectful in my approach, he reacted dismissively, labeling me as annoying and rude. Ultimately, I found myself apologizing, we made amends, and he visited me the following week. However, I realized he wasn't inviting me out for traditional dates, which led me to suspect our interactions were solely physical or that he was potentially hiding me for some reason. During this time, his phone rang several times with a call from a woman, making me suspicious that she was waiting for him to return home. When I asked him if he had a girlfriend, he denied it. Although I was developing feelings for him, I hesitated about the prospect of a relationship, as something felt off. The following week, I saw him walk past me with the same girl while ignoring my presence. 2 days later, he attempted to contact me by sending a video of himself fanning himself with cash. I chose not to respond, reasoning that engaging felt pointless after he had lied to me and disregarded my existence. Normally, I would have communicated my feelings, but I feared that he might dismiss or minimize me, leading me to hold back. After 2 weeks without contact, I discovered through a work friend that he was trying to charm her friend, unexpectedly appearing at her house with a meal. We started discussing him, and although I didn't divulge too much personal information, I mentioned my uneasy feelings regarding him, expressing my concern that he might have a girlfriend while pursuing both me and her. I shared my discomfort regarding his treatment of me, all of which was honest. I then went out with my friend and the girl he had pursued. She posted a group photo on Instagram, after which I received a message from him stating, "Don't be slandering my good name." I replied, asking what he meant, to which he responded, "Keep my wife's name out of your mouth." I showed my friends the message, and they informed me she had mentioned hearing about his alleged girlfriend. The following day, he sent me a text accusing me of having no self-restraint, questioning why I told those girls he was always texting many girls back home while having a girlfriend. I acknowledged that my comments were exaggerated, admitting I mentioned he was texting me there and that I suspected he had a girlfriend. I also stated that he had engaged in similar behavior back home. While I regretted sharing those thoughts, all I conveyed was accurate. He criticized me for feeling the need to speak negatively to anyone willing to listen. This was the only time I had expressed these feelings about him, though. He said he would have valued me as a friend before this incident and would describe me as a lovely person if asked. Recognizing that I had acted inappropriately, I felt a deep sense of guilt and shame. I sincerely apologized, accepted responsibility, and acknowledged the hurt my words caused. Nevertheless, throughout this past period, he has not treated me like a friend worth valuing. I have felt used, dismissed, and disrespected. His behavior has been erratic, offering minimal communication while insulting me when I expressed my unease about his conduct. He acted as if I were invisible while passing me by with the other girl. This is not how I define friendship. When I spoke about him to prevent this girl from wasting her time, it was because I felt he was misleading all three of us. At that stage, his treatment left me feeling justified in not being loyal to someone I felt had wronged me. In response to my apology, he conveyed, "I think you are a terrible friend, and it has changed my perception of you as a person." I acknowledged that my action was wrong and expressed my sincere regret. I recognized his right to be upset, but asserted that it was unacceptable for him to address me in such a manner. I indicated my willingness to remain civil and amicably resolve things, should he be open to it. He replied that I was living in a fantasy, labeling me as a dreadful friend, and insisted that my behavior demonstrated a lack of loyalty and understanding of my actions. He threatened to air my personal issues the next time he spoke to anyone I knew in that area, adding an offhand comment suggesting I should confront the girl I worked with. Although I admit fault for gossiping about him, which was wrong, I genuinely want to learn and improve. This situation has caused me considerable anxiety. I am starting to question my self-worth and fearing that I am a terrible person. Additionally, I have confided in him about past mistakes and sensitive family matters, which makes me anxious about his implication of revealing my private struggles to others. I am filled with shame, guilt, and remorse about everything that has transpired and wish I could reverse it. Any insightful guidance or advice would be appreciated, as this predicament is deeply affecting me, and I feel isolated in discussing it. Summary: I faced a difficult conclusion with a man I dated, 26-year-old female and 29-year-old male. Any advice would be appreciated. Story 3. Dump truck delivery. 20 years ago, I worked for a landscaping supply company driving a dump truck. Although I have spent most of my career as a software engineer since then, I had a few years driving a truck during that period. These were single-axle trucks with a gross weight of 26,000 pounds. We frequently overloaded them by about a ton. Mascouta was on the outskirts of the area to which we often delivered, and we sometimes transported rock or mulch to the high school located there. One day, I arrived with approximately 4 or 5 tons of topsoil. If I remember correctly, I had to navigate around the school to locate someone. I suspect I had been briefed on where to meet individuals, but those individuals were not present. I inquired about the name listed on the delivery ticket. It was written in a manner that implied I should recognize who they were when I finally found someone behind the school. I was informed that the person I was looking for was either a math or physics teacher. I don't recall precisely, but it was related to STEM fields. I believe I asked that person if they could assist me in locating the teacher. Eventually, I met the teacher and 3 or 4 students in front of the school. I was unfamiliar with any of them. I might have still been 19 or 20 at that time and appeared youthful. It was not uncommon for drivers to search for individuals receiving deliveries, and everything seemed normal up until that point. I exited the truck and was informed that the soil was to be dumped into a planter they were constructing with decorative blocks around the high school sign. It was located approximately 50 feet into the grass between the road and the parking lot in front of the school. I hesitated and might have managed to utter a hesitant sound before being interrupted. I intended to communicate that the truck would leave marks in the grass. The truck, weighing 12,000 pounds when empty, was heavy enough to compress the soil. Although the grass would only be flattened, it would leave a noticeable track wherever the truck passed, likely 1 or 2 inches deep, that would remain visible for a considerable time. The tracks would certainly be conspicuous. I cannot remember if I spoke more than 1 syllable before being interrupted. My initial interlocutor was the teacher, followed by 1 or 2 of the students, all adopting a condescending tone. I tried to speak again, but I faced a mix of disbelief regarding my understanding of the instructions and repeated attempts to explain their desires, as though I were a 5-year-old or did not comprehend English. I believe I attempted to communicate 2 or 3 times before ultimately giving up. I submitted to their demands, returned to the truck, and drove into the grass, creating ruts that the groundskeepers would regret for years to come. The grass would be cut to an even height above these ruts, but remnants would still be felt when driving over them with a mower. I backed the truck up next to one side of the planter and unloaded soil until it was piled above the small semi-oval retaining wall, at which point I was signaled to stop. The sign was situated in the middle of the planter, meaning that the soil was only piled on one side, leaving the other side nearly empty. I assumed we would need to drive to the opposite side of the planter when you have dumped enough loads of material. You develop an intuition about what is required to fill a space, but after being told to stop, I exited the truck to suggest that they might need more soil to fill the entire planter. Once again, I was unable to complete my sentence. I attempted to explain that when they spread the soil around in the planter, it would not reach the edge. Additionally, I would have been pleased to remain and assist them in moving some soil to the bare area so that we could dump more without spilling onto the grass. It was evident they had no interest in anything I had to say. Their disrespect was unmistakably intentional. I am unsure if there was some perceived slight or if this was simply a group dynamic of bullying. I was instructed to dump the remaining soil, probably 2 or 3 tons left in the truck, which could have been useful in the planter, into a row crop field behind the school. Here is another nuance of working with a dump truck that might not be immediately apparent. Dirt does not spread evenly from a dump bed. Most trucks feature chains on the gate that allow you to control how quickly material is released. These work well with small rocks and gravel. For materials that tend to clump, the chains can be adjusted to allow the gate to open wider and reduce the likelihood of clogs. However, for dirt and mulch, this system is largely ineffective. The material hits the gate, compacts, and gets stuck. Once clogged, you cannot release the chains due to the thousands of pounds of material pressing against it. You must dig it out, which is a labor-intensive task even with gravity's assistance. Of course, this entire exercise was doomed to failure from the outset. Fortunately, the individuals present did not know to ask for guidance, or I am sure they would have attempted to tell me how to perform my job, which would have left me either arguing with people who disregarded my thoughts or forced to set the chains and spend 10 minutes unclogging the truck's gate. It should be evident that there was too much subtlety in this scenario for me to convey within the context of a conversation where I was not allowed to finish a sentence. We were not engaged in a dialogue, and for some reason, these individuals were enjoying this. Although this occurred a long time ago, I do not recall many specific words exchanged, but I distinctly remember one student slowly explaining, "Just take the truck over there and drive while you dump it out," accompanied by hand gestures, as if I were a child. By this point, I felt such disdain that I would not have done anything to help them. I had them sign for the delivery, and then drove around the school and into the field. I felt a bit of sympathy for the individual who farmed that field, so I genuinely attempted to make the best of the situation. I also questioned whether they had permission to do this. I drove as quickly as I deemed safe in the freshly tilled field and began to raise the bed. As is typical with topsoil, nothing happened until the entire mass began sliding and ultimately landed in the field in a large pile. It was evident that if you knew what to look for, the truck had been moving when it dumped, but it still resulted in a pile that someone would have to contend with. A week or so later, I drove past the school on another delivery. I was curious to see if they had gone to the field to gather some of the sifted topsoil after discovering that the planter was barely half filled, or if they planned to use it to repair the ruts in the grass. There were still visible tracks leading to the newly constructed planter. The planter was half filled with dirt, leaving multiple courses of block exposed at the back. The large pile of dirt remained conspicuously in the field. The planter stayed in that state for years. I have no idea if anyone ever addressed it. The entire complex was later demolished and replaced with a new building, and I moved away from the area long ago. I am not entirely convinced that this situation was an instance of malicious compliance. I had no intention of being malicious, but I was not going to argue with individuals who were both disrespectful and borderline hostile. I held that position for far too long, perhaps 6 years, so I certainly experienced many unfavorable or strange encounters with customers, like the time I disappointed a couple trying to arrange a deliveryman 3-way. But this incident stands out as one of the worst. Story 4. Am I the a-hole for getting mad at my daughter and scolding her for accidentally embarrassing me last month? I realize this is a lengthy message, and there are parts that may be quite confusing, but I kindly ask you to read all of it. I am seeking help and guidance. Last month, my son, 22 years old, visited me, 41 years old, my husband, 47 years old, and my daughter, 15 years old, while he was far from his usual residence. In the evening, my son was in his room on a call with his friends. I reminded my daughter not to say anything inappropriate in the hallway because she has a tendency to say strange and inappropriate things at random times, which I acknowledge I haven't been effective at preventing. My daughter then went to the bathroom, and I believe she forgot what I said, as she stepped out and asked me whether I was on my period. I motioned for her to be quiet, but then she began to apologize loudly, which stressed me out because my shushing her and her loudly saying sorry could easily be misinterpreted as abusive by the people my son was speaking to. She returned to the bathroom, and I heard the tub and sink water running at full force, something I have repeatedly told her not to do. She had turned on the water to drown out noise. I was already frustrated due to her earlier embarrassment, so I went to the bathroom and inquired why the water was running so high. She apologized and turned it down. I told her that there was no justification for this and that it was becoming annoying. While she continued to apologize, I responded curtly with an irritated "okay" and exited the room. She remained in the bathroom for a while without water, but then I needed to use it, so I knocked on the door, and she rushed to her room. After using the bathroom, I went to my daughter's room about 10 minutes later to apply band-aids and lotion to her hands. My daughter has struggled with severe eczema since she was young, and she frequently scratches it due to the itchiness. I tell her not to scratch and to apply lotion, but she refuses to listen. She rarely puts on lotion and continues to scratch, attracting the concern of her teachers, who have been applying lotion to her hands and urging her to do so herself. This situation would not be occurring if she simply listened and applied lotion, but she does not. I ensure she applies lotion in the morning before school, but she needs to maintain it when her hands start to itch. Upon entering her room, I noticed she was clearly upset and had clearly been crying. She lied to me, claiming her redness was simply due to allergies, but I knew she had been crying. I was still quite irritated, and then I sat down with the lotion and band-aids to treat her hands. I noticed a fresh scar from her scratching, and I scolded her irritably, expressing that this behavior was unacceptable. I explained that teachers were applying lotion to her hands out of concern, which made it seem as though I was not caring for her properly. At this point, she was trembling, which only added to my irritation. I addressed her earlier behavior, pointing out how she had gone to her room in tears to elicit guilt from me, and she once again lied about her allergies. I asserted that I knew she was crying. In a distressed and increasingly louder tone, she claimed she had just been in her room crying quietly, and that she was not trying to make me feel guilty. Many times in the past, she has yelled loudly at me and had dramatic outbursts, so I instructed her to calm down, warning her that she was creating problems for herself. I continued to express my annoyance about her actions that night, and she kept repeating her apologies, which only frustrated me further. I told her to stop saying that, indicating that she was behaving as though I was doing something egregious to her. I persisted in reprimanding her about her hands, and even mentioned her putting water in her gloves to help with her eczema, which resulted in a foul odor, as she believed it was normal. She then retorted, "You always tell me I need to let things go. You need to learn to let go of things. You're a hypocrite." I responded by telling her to mind her words and announced that her visit to Disney World was now in jeopardy, especially since we were going very soon. I made it clear that she could not speak to me that way. In response, she stated that she did not want to go to Disney World, and in the heat of the moment, I exclaimed that I didn't want to go either, suggesting that her father and I could go without her and that she could remain with her grandmother. As I continued to voice my frustrations about her behavior, I noticed that she was trembling. I instructed her to stop shaking, asserting that nothing so severe had occurred for her to react this way toward me. Initially, I thought she was upset with me, but in hindsight, I believe she was actually frightened of me. I continued to express my discontent before finally leaving her room. After a while, I began to feel remorseful, so I returned to apologize. I expressed my regret for losing my temper, asking if we could move past the incident, reiterating that I still wanted her to come to Disney World. The name I used is not her real name. She accepted my apology and fell asleep. Hours later, when she awoke and emerged from her room, I informed her, "Emma, can we please forget about last night?" and apologized once again. A few minutes later, while I was in her room, I attempted to lighten the mood by saying, "Let's be happy," reminding her about our upcoming trip to Disney World. Later, after she returned home from school and I was lying on the couch with her by my side, I randomly recalled the previous night's events and told her, "I am truly sorry for my behavior last night." She replied that it was okay. The reason I am writing this a month later is that I have been reflecting on the situation and feeling guilty about my actions. I am uncertain if I was justified in my reactions, given that she wasn't listening when she left the water running, which caused me embarrassment, or if I should have responded differently. She is frequently moody and irritable, often screaming and crying over minor inconveniences. She has been resistant to taking care of her hands by applying lotion and band-aids. She even protested against soaking her hands because, as she put it, she needs her free time. I am quite exhausted by her behavior and her complaints over trivial matters, and I have been establishing boundaries. Consequently, I am now questioning whether my reaction was warranted and if she needed to hear my reprimands or if I overreacted. I understand she has autism, but she must learn to manage her emotions when frustrated and to follow instructions when I give them. Reddit, am I the antagonist for becoming angry with my autistic daughter and reprimanding her for unintentionally embarrassing me last month?